Let's take a look at GeoPak's Translate, Rotate, and Scale tool. And for this example, I'm just going to use a simple case, but it happens all too often, unfortunately. And the case that I'm going to use to demonstrate the tool is that there was a tree location done in the field, and the instrument person was setting on this point here, 3270, and thought they were backsighting this point here, the Calc 1628. But it turns out that they were actually backsighting this point here, Calc 1643. So what we'll need to do to correct this is essentially rotate this group of trees and shrubs that were located from the setup in a counterclockwise direction. And to do a quick measure on that direction, I've already drawn some lines in MicroStation, which I'll display now using my survey display. You can see currently I've isolated on only the woods lines, evergreen trees, stump, bush or shrub, and deciduous trees. I'll go back from the display only selection to normal display to display the green lines I've sketched in for measurement purposes. And then I'll use MicroStation's measure angle tool to measure between this line and this line. And we'll see that angle is approximately 28.88 degrees. Naturally, being surveyors, I would like to go ahead and change this angle display. So I'll do that by going to Settings, Design File, and then I'll go to Coordinate Readout and change this from decimal degrees to degrees, minutes, and seconds. And then I'll remeasure that angle from this line to this line. And that's going to be 23 degrees, 52 minutes, and 59 seconds. And we'll simply plug that number into our tool as a negative number to rotate these trees counterclockwise. Let me close my angle measure tool, and then I'll go back in my survey display and display only the feature codes that I've selected and the few control points that I have here. To get to my Translate, Rotate, and Scale tool, or I should more properly term that a conversion, it's under Geometry from our main survey menu, Conversions, and then Translate, Rotate, and Scale. I can also get to the same tool or conversion through Classic Cogo, and then I'll open my Cogo window or my coordinate geometry window, and then I can go to Tools, Translation, and Rotation. Regardless of which method I choose to get to this tool, it's going to be the same tool, which is Scale, Rotate, and Translate. And within this tool, close the angle measuring tool. Within this tool, I have the option to translate, rotate, and scale points, curves, spirals, chains, survey chains, parcels, and lines. Of course, in this case, I'm just going to translate and rotate some points. And I have two methods to choose this. I can either get these elements from Navigator. That will open up my Cogo window again and give me the option to retrieve these points from Navigator simply by highlighting them, going back to my Scale, Rotate, and Translate tool, and then clicking this icon. Then GeoPak will go ahead and fill in all of those various points for me. Now this is not the set of points I wish to use. And as a matter of fact, I don't know all of their names or numbers right off the top of my head. So I'm going to use a graphical method of identifying these points. And that method is going to be my MicroStation selection tool. Let me close a few windows here. I'll close my Navigator, and then I'll go to my MicroStation selection tool. And I will simply drag a window around the points that I would like to manipulate. Now I will use my Control key to isolate a few of these points, and I will remove those points from my selection. Because these are control points in the field that I do not wish to move. But I will rotate all of the trees that were located from my setup. Once these points are chosen by the MicroStation selection tool, and you can also use MicroStation's power selector, I'll go back to the Scale, Rotate, and Translate dialog, and I'll click this icon, which is Get Elements from MicroStation Selection Set. And then once again, GeoPak will go ahead and fill in the various point names and numbers of the points that I've chosen in the selection set. The general rule here is that if you know the point names or numbers or element names and numbers, you can go ahead and get them from the navigator. Even in that case, it may be easier to get the elements from the MicroStation selection set. But if you do not know their names or the element numbers, then you definitely would want to go ahead and choose these graphically, which is a very easy and quick method, as you can see, for choosing quite a few elements. Moving further down the dialog box, we have the option to either increment or overwrite the existing points. And in most cases, you'll want to choose increment and then provide a point number or point value to increment these points. In this case, point number calc 1643 would become calc 2643. And what this does is provide a method for protecting you from overwriting your existing points in case there was some incorrect value used in this scale, rotate, and translate dialog box. For my demonstration purposes here, I'm going to choose just to overwrite my existing point names and numbers. I'm going to uncheck translate, but before I do that, let's just go over a few of the methods that you can use for translation of points and other GeoPack elements. What I currently have selected is deltas, and that is just simply giving a particular value to move points in the northing, easting, and or elevation range. Very simple and easy to use. Another option is to define a direction and a distance. Define a direction, which of course can also be an azimuth, a bearing, point ahead to point back, direction ahead of a curve, etc. Essentially what you're doing is defining a distance and direction, and then GeoPack, using these various methods, will go ahead and calculate a delta x and y to move the points that were chosen. Another method for translation is point to point. This works the same way in that you define an initial point and then what that point would be in another coordinate system. The end result is still a delta calculation that moves the points a certain x and y value. Lastly, there is a point to coordinate method. This allows you to define a point in the existing GPK database and then define the desired northing and easting for that point to be moved to. Of course, in our case I'm demonstrating here, the only thing I need to do is to perform a rotation on these points. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck translate, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the rotate, and we'll fill out that dialog as we had defined earlier. Of course, there are different methods that we can use. One is by angle, and then the second was point back, point ahead to a bearing, which will allow us to define a point back, point ahead, the point to rotate about, and a particular bearing that will be rotated to. I'm going to choose by angle because I've already measured this angle. And I remember roughly that that angle was 28 degrees. But let me go ahead and go down to my information area, my message center for MicroStation, and scroll down and read some of the messages. And it turns out that in this window I can see my exact angle. And I will go ahead and take note of that angle, which was 23, 52, 59. We'll just round that to 23 degrees and 53 minutes. I'll go ahead and change this angle. Rotation is going to be minus 23.5300, and I'll also change the rotation point. That's going to be over here, 0.3270. Also, I'm going to go up to my point list here and remove this calc 1643. I do not wish to rotate that. Next, I'll zoom out slightly to give us some room. And then finally, I'll go ahead and click apply. Our GeoPack points will be moved about the screen and then rotated, essentially moving our trees to the correct position that they should have been if there was not a blown angle in the setup. One item I did not cover and did not use in this command was the scale factor, and that is simply applied by checking on the checkbox next to scale, giving an appropriate x or easting factor, y or northing factor, and also it is possible to give a z or elevation scale factor. In this command, of course, this scaling will happen about a point, and that can either be typed into the field here, such as 3305, which was already in the about point field, or I can clear out that field and double click on a point in the DGN space in order to scale about that particular point from the GPK file.